All right, we're off and running. Welcome, everybody. I can't believe it. Welcome to the virtual Dalcroze meetup. This is meetup number 75. And here we are on September 16th for most of us, September 17th for some of you who may be watching later. It's the middle of the night over there though, so you never know. I just want to thank you all. I'm Emma Shubin. I'm one of the co-hosts of the virtual Dalcroze meetup, and usually I'm here with Stephen Neely and Veronica Bolevsky. But today they are busy starting their first full week at school, et cetera, and have meetings and such. But I am so happy I get to be here with you guys. Our general theme for the day is getting to talk a bit about improvisation with images and imagery. And we're so excited that Carolyn Lee from the US and Nick Fagnilli, I hope I'm saying your name right, Nick. When he comes and joins us, he'll be here soon as well. And I have a couple of announcements and then we'll be off and running, but we usually do a little bit of like a breakout room moment to say hello to each other and get a chance to meet each other. So I think I might do that with us first. Here we go. Mari is here. Hi, Mari. It's good to see you. And real quick before I do that, the only other thing that I wanted to make sure I say is if you weren't here this past week to see Joan Pope's short course, it's not too late to join. And the second class of 3 is happening this Friday, and I'll give you guys a moment if you were there to share with each other in your breakout rooms a little bit about that. But usually when we break out, we say who we are, where we're from, and who we teach, or who we'd like to teach, or something along those lines, what we're interested in doing. So if you just give me 1 second here, I will throw us in breakout rooms. We make it short and sweet. We get a couple of minutes, and let's see. I'm gonna do 3 different rooms and here we go. And if you don't mind, click join when this comes up. Welcome back, everybody. We are so excited to have you here for our 75th meetup. A few announcements before we get into the juicy presentations. All upcoming VDM dates you can see in the Google Doc, including the free meetups. There's a series of upcoming masterclasses and short courses that I would be remiss if I didn't tell you about. As I was mentioning before, we were in our breakout rooms. If you missed Joan Pope, it's not too late. Join us this week and the following week, or you can watch the videos later, so you can do it asynchronously as well, and it was magical. Friends, I stayed up extra late to make it happen, and it was 100% worth it, and I will be watching that video myself, so she's such a genius, it's not to be missed. So that's the Fridays left are the 20th and the 27th, and you will also receive the 13th class recording if you sign up now. There's masterclass number 37 with Jacqueline Van, which is happening on September 28th and 29th. I am leading a short course about using Dalcroze principles in the private lesson. I'm a flutist, but also, of course, I improvise from the piano, but I really want to be talking about Dalcroze in small spaces and in creative ways to ignite improvisation, connection, enjoyment, work with how you can practice at home, and of course, movement and how we incorporate movement into our practice and into our teaching in the one-on-one situation. And that'll be happening throughout October. And then coming up in mid-October, we have Sachiko Muranaka, who many of us may not know, but she's from Japan and is just an amazing teacher. And we're so excited to have her join us. And then Andrew Davidson from the UK. Dalcroze Essentials, his specific title is Thinking, Making, and Doing of Dalcroze. And for both my short course and his short course and the one that's currently happening with Joan Pope, you don't need to have any prior experience and you don't need to be a quote unquote Dalcrozian per se. We want to give you great ideas that you can use in your lessons and in your life as a teacher, performer, educator. Our last one of this particular season into the new year is our last masterclass is with Jerison Lee on November 16th and 17th. Okay, we're almost there. My last announcement is I am the co-chair of the 7th International Conference on Velcro Studies, and our call for papers is currently open. So I tested it out myself. It is possible to submit your either paper, presentation. There's a section for out-of-the-box submissions. It's very exciting. Roundtables, performances. It's going to be right here in Luxembourg this summer, and all of that information can be found at velcrostudies.com. And I am really, really honored that I get to help host it. And I can tell you right now, we're going to have a really great time. I'm going to make sure of it. So please join us and please take a look and consider submitting something. There's a space for everybody. There's a new idea with thematic tracks that we're having. So lots of different ways to conceive of and participate in our community and look at the more research-oriented side of things, but not miss out on this whole aspect of us all being in a room together, doing things and creating and exchanging. And there will be online options as well for those of you who can't make the journey across whatever pond you're coming from to Luxembourg. And so as a VDM person, I made sure that I advocated that we have a good chunk of our sessions will be available for those of you who may not be able to get away for that amount of time. Okay, without further ado, we are so excited to have Carolyn Lee here today. She lives in the Boston area, and she's going to be talking about improvisation with images. As always, we give 5 minutes to our performers. I'll give you a little warning when you've got about a minute left, and then we'll move on to Nick. And Nick, are you here yet? I am not sure that he is. So either way, I'm sure that we're going to have a rich opportunity to have lots of discussion afterwards, and hopefully Nick will be with us as soon as he can be. So Carolyn, you've got 5 to 10 minutes. You actually are not going to be too much on time because we got a little space today. All right, take it away.
All right, thank you, Emma. Just wanted to make sure before I start, can everybody hear me loud and clear? Okay, we can just like make a thumbs up or, all right, perfect. Thank you. So hello, everyone. I'm Caroline. I'm a piano teacher here in Watertown. I live in the Boston area. And I know Veronica is not here today, but I wanted to thank her for inviting me because she I don't know, she texted me a while ago and asked me, would you like to make a little presentation? I was like, sure, I will think of something. And so I'm a piano teacher. I also have a background in art history. I studied in Paris years ago. I'm originally from France. And when Veronica asked me, I thought, why not combining the two things that I love the most, piano and art? So today I'm going to talk briefly about how to improvise at the piano with the help of images and movement. Improvisation used to be like very daunting to me at first, and but I hope this is going to be very short, but I hope by understanding how movement and visual imagery, how they influence our playing, maybe we can unlock new levels of creativity. And so why is it so daunting? Because improvisation involves spontaneously creating music, as you all know, and relying on intuition, previous knowledge, and creativity rather than pre-composed music, which we were so used to, like during our many years of studies. And it's both ways. It's about embracing freedom while still relying on a certain sense of structure. And the idea that I'd like to present here is to I'm sure many of you had the idea already, but it's to start with an image, to include physical movement, as it adds new dimension to the musical expression, and use those tools to create an improvisation at the piano or whatever other instruments you might be playing. I'm thinking of you, Emma, on the flute. Megan, you said violin, right? So it's obviously not just the piano. So I wanted to show you a practical exercise that I did with my students a few times. And so let me just see, can share. Do you all see that image. So this is a painting by Juan Miro, the Spanish painter, called The Dancer from 1925. And so the first thing that I ask my student is just observe. Observe the painting. What do you see? Look at it, look at all the details, and just very simply tell me what you see. So, so tell me what you see. It can be about what do you see? What is the character? What is the subject? What's the color, what's the mood. So yeah, it's just looking and thinking of what you see. Then you want to move up to like, what are the keywords here? Find some relevant keywords, like not sure, you probably have a couple of ideas, like, blue, I see some circle, there's some sort of moon, the heart shape thing. And then visualize the movement in a paint. Like, imagine a painting was alive, right? It represents something like alive. Like, how would that move? Like, what movement do you see? And then can you let your body movement sort of mimic the visual? I usually do with my students, like, where they're looking at on the left, there are some circles. So can you move your hands like very, gently, draw circles in the air? How would you draw those circles in the air, right? So, the movement should be natural. It should be like, if it's like very, it's very dotted. So obviously you're not going to do any like, I don't know, dotted movement or, it's going to be very, very large. So explore and try different types of movement. Can be, slow, smooth, fast. Observe how it affects your movement as you explore. And finally, what do you hear? So see, it's just like three very simple steps. Look, move, and what do you hear in your head? And I try to guide them, telling them like, you don't have to do anything complicated. So start with something simple, right? For example, on those circles that I was talking about earlier, like what can you do with those circles? Can you make a circle on the piano? A wonderful idea a student had was, she said triplet. I was like, this is awesome. Because it's, the circles just like brings the idea of dance, and dance is always in three. And she said triplet. All right, then use triplets, right? Or you can use simple chords or repeated rhythm, something very basic, so you can start on something and use those as basic blocks on which you can build your improvisation. So let me just go to the piano. I'm not sure if I have enough time, Emma, and you can tell me if I reach the timing. Oops.
Minutes, if that's okay, Carolyn?
I'm sorry?
Will 2 more minutes work?
2 more minutes. Oh, yeah. All right. So I'm just like, I think just at the piano, it'll be easier. Just to go back to the image, we went to the idea of triplet, right?
Oh, Carolyn, if you don't mind, turn on your sound. If you can turn on your here.
Audio. Do I need to?
So that'll be under your audio settings. If you.
Oh, I see. Okay.
Or in your top right corner.
Would that work?
It's better. Yep.
Okay. It says your device is working properly. Also. All right. So, with my student, we played something very simple, triplets, right? And And I said, just continue, right? Triplet. Then she said, there was something that she said, there's a line, right? Octave, because she was like, oh, there's a line going up, so how about we go up, right? And I said, can you do something about the moon? You know, it's like, what is the mood? It's obviously not daytime. It's like something very quiet at night. So at night, very some kind of try to create some kind of like atmosphere, right? And then there was this also, and I swear I didn't say anything about Miro because I didn't want to give any clue. But my student said, "Oh, you know, it sounds it looks Spanish, but I don't know. She might be doing dance." And I said, "Well, you know, what would sound Spanish to you?" So we're experimenting. So that's also, you know, how to add you know, another layer. So in the end I suggested something like the how we call the habanera rhythm. So this is, you know, a couple of ideas to help you and your student just like find something to start with at the piano, and then explore, and then just you know, be curious, take the time to explore, take the time to allow the emotions, you know, to guide your improvisation, and you know, let them, you know, shape your melodies. And so yes, I'm just going to conclude now because I know it's very short. So improvising on the piano, it's a wonderful way to enhance your students' creativity, you know, and combining movement with visual imagery. I think it can be very powerful because it's not only, you're not only relying on oral but also visual, and obviously the more you improvise, the more comfortable you become. But yeah, remember, improvisation, there's no right or wrong answer. It's about exploration and discovery.
Thank you so much, Carolyn. It's such a joy to hear you talk about your journey, especially from the idea of having this image and this visual thing directly into movement first. I love that. And we'll have some
Thank
time
you.
about this and ask questions and discuss. But up next, we have Nick. Nick, are you out there? Nick
Yes.
Fagnili joining us from CMU. It's our first time getting to meet him. We're so thrilled you're here. Thank you for coming, Carolyn. Thank you for your presentation. And from what I understand, well, Nick, why don't you tell us what you're going to be talking about today?
Yeah, well, let me preface this with a couple of things. I've taken exactly 3 Eurythmics classes with Stephen. Maybe that's 4. I'm probably losing count by now into the semester, but I'm very new to the ideas around using movement in this way, and I find that the more I learn about what Stephen has to offer in class there, the more I'm able to talk about how my body relates and interprets music already. There's a whole other story there, but that has to do with my journey as an educator and why I'm a grad student now at CMU. I will cut to the chase and say that historically, when approaching improvisation, specifically based on imagery with students, I run into a few different problems. As an example, I used to teach group piano lessons where I would use something called the Piano Safari curriculum, which I think was written by some Australian folks or some British folks. And I really like it. I like that it's interval based over, you know, harmony and function based, but that's a whole other story. But what I found was that the improvisation prompts consisted solely of come up with bird music, come up with ocean music. And the kids would just look at me and scratch their heads like, I have no idea what to do here. They could draw me a scene, and that was part of the prompt as well, draw and think about how it would move. But they had a really hard time relating that to musical characteristics that they could express. And so part of my teaching, what I really enjoy about teaching young children is teaching them about the basic behaviors of sound. And if a child knows how sound behaves, then they know how to make music. And so just before I logged on here, I was able to do a bit of an exercise with my first and second grade class here at this Montessori school north of Pittsburgh, where I teach. And I did exactly that. A lot of chance is involved also in what I do. We have Orff instruments here in the classroom. And so I rolled dice and we selected notes randomly, a group of 5 notes. And then I improvised a little bit on those notes. So I modeled for them, making up some music based on this selection of notes. And I said, where does this take you? What are some places this takes you? And they gave me different answers, but a lot of them involved the water. Some of them said the beach, some of them said the underwater. So I said, okay, fine. It sounds like our minds are underwater right now. And the key question, and this is what I ended up doing with the group piano kids as well, because the given pieces give them parameters maybe of what pitches to use. Maybe they're learning black key glissandi and stuff. So it's an opportunity to use something like that. But here in the classroom, we chose a limited number of notes on the Orff instruments. And then I said, think about underwater. What are some creatures and things that we would see? They listed some sharks, pufferfish, jellyfish, things like that. And I said, okay, what kinds of sounds do you think you would hear underwater? Would you hear high sounds, low sounds, fast sounds, slow sounds? Just like in Caroline's presentation, there are no wrong answers here, right? The important part is that we make a certain number of choices. But the hardest part is the first choice. The hardest part is being given the scenario, the image, and saying, oh, what do I do with that? Right? And so I found a lot of success in connecting this to specific sound characteristics. And I have the advantage of having with me this blackboard. Let me turn the lights on here in the classroom so we can see that. It gets really hot in here, usually when I turn the lights on. But I'm willing to do that for all of you here today. If you see me sweat, I'm sorry.
No problem.
Just other set of lights. Is that okay? Maybe I gotta move a little bit so that we can see what's going on. Take the laptop here. Okay, so I have on the board different sound characteristics. They said, oh, we might hear loud sounds in the water. We might hear fast sounds, and we might hear slow sounds, right? They didn't give me high or low. I was looking for that, but that was fine. And then that's where I asked them, what kinds of characters are we going to see in the ocean? What kinds of fish? What kinds of things are going to happen? And then for each of these characters, we had sharks, pufferfish, sand, octopus, and jellyfish. And so then we assigned a rhythm to each of those. And all I said was, raise your hand and clap me a rhythm for a shark. Raise your hand, clap me a rhythm for the sand. Clap me a rhythm for the octopus. Clap me a rhythm for the pufferfish. Then for the jellyfish, I just decided we would play as fast as we could, go up and down, you know, a kind of burst of energy, right? And so the next step is very close to what I do regularly as an improviser among adults, among other musicians in a setting of improvised music. And it was very interesting to try and lay it out for them because they're so young, first and second graders. But I said, okay, you have your notes, you have those rhythms, choose what rhythm you want to play and put that over your selection of notes. But be very careful and choose where you want to start, choose where you stop, and making those choices depends on listening to everything around you. Always ask yourself, is this the right time to make my sound? And after I've made my sound, is there a right time to stop making the sound? Is there a right time to change to a different character? And so we got to improvise over that just for a few minutes. Probably we spent the whole class setting the parameters up, and then the last 7 or 10 minutes improvising on it. And they noticed that the more we did it, the more a logic began to arise. And so the important thing that I'm teaching here is not so much a technique around improvisation, it's a technique around making choices. And the first choice is always the most difficult one in music. And I've found as a composer and now as an educator also, that when it comes to your first choices, most of the time a random choice is probably going to be just as good as one you thought about. But it's the subsequent choices that make the music begin to make sense. The more they turned the rhythms over in their head and the more they played with the selection of notes, things made sense to them. A universe of musical logic began to arise. And so how should I conclude this? In when Carolyn was speaking, I was thinking then of way I would have asked them had I heard something like Carolyn's presentation, how does a shark move? How does an octopus move? And I had a moment where, the octopus rhythm was all eighth notes because somebody said, oh, it has 8 legs. Let's give it 8 notes. Amazing. I love it. But they started repeating one note. And I said to them, exactly. I said, an octopus doesn't just they go all over the keyboard, bump, 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 and then they got it then, right? So adding movement to this would have been very easy, and I wish I had thought about it sooner. But like I said, I'm a newbie to Eurythmics, and the more I'm in Eurythmics class, the more I am understanding the relationship to my bodily feelings towards music. And so it's a constant unpacking, and there are lots of other things I can talk about. I would love to in the future speak about my experience with Kurtag's Jetekok, which is a series of piano pieces that really ask for a lot of kinetic motion, whole body motion from the students. And I've had a resounding success improvising in those styles and bringing those home to the parents. I thought they were going to say, what kind of crazy music are you teaching my child? But they love it because they love seeing how the kid gets engaged with the whole body. But that's a subject for another story. That's just, that's my experience so far with movement in this context. What I just described did not include a lot of movement, but very easily could have.
Nick, we are so grateful to have you here. Welcome. And we're thrilled to have new friends all the time.
Awesome.
Maybe
Glad I'm here.
things I resonated the most, I've used Piano Safari quite a bit, and I think some of those authors must have some Dalcroze in their background, but I really love how you talk about, it's not so much about the first choice, it's about what happens after that. And any Dalcrozian will agree, I think, that this idea of like asking your students to actively listen and to make a decision about when they start and stop and how they relate to the sounds that they're making within a context, it's going to be fabulous. And then the question,
my bodily relationship to music up to this point in my life has begun and ended with listening experiences and what that does in my nervous system. So it instantly became a journey to try and connect that to my grosser motor skills. So I'm learning to do that as an adult, and I'm also learning to incorporate that here in the classroom. And I'm so lucky that I get to go from Stephen's 8 a.m. class to right here to the school and just repeat it with 4-year-olds. It's excellent.
well, we have so much here to talk about. And so I'm going to open up the floor. We can talk about things we heard with Carolyn. We can talk about things we heard with Nick. We can bring things that we're thinking about and this spurred in our conscious about what we need in our own classrooms. And so I'm just going to open up the floor. So questions, comments, things you want to discuss from this, please. Yes, go ahead, Mari.
Thank you so much for the wonderful presentations. It was very inspiring, both of you. I have a question to Nick. Maybe I have missed, but about the selection of the notes. What are the examples of the selection of the note?
I have a trumpet because I'm in brass methods class, and so my original intent was to play along with them on trumpet. So I made them select B flat. And then we selected the rest of the notes by rolling a 6-sided die, 1 being C and 6 being A. So we landed on a vaguely pentatonic-ish selection of notes, but not exactly. You know, on the Orff instruments, there really aren't wrong notes to choose. In the past, with my fourth and fifth graders, I've set the Orff instruments to the Prometheus scale with the F sharp and B flat and no G, and they made a piece of music that ended the world. So the possibilities are really, really endless on the Orff instruments, even though it does not seem like it.
Great, thank you.
If you want to know the notes specifically, I can go get one and I can tell you, but I don't know off the top of my head.
Yeah, I was just imagining like what would be the sound like, you know, and then just the thought about what's the selection of the notes, and then
Yeah, but with Orff, it's there's not a whole lot can go wrong when you're just choosing notes on the Orff instruments.
I've used the Orff instruments, not right now, but I used to use the Orff
Yeah, and I would do that on the piano too. Choose notes at random. I'd use a 12-sided die for you to include all the chromatic notes.
Yeah, great, thank you.
Thank you. I saw Carolyn's hand. Also, Megan, did I see your hand as well? Okay, go ahead, Carolyn.
Yeah, I just wanted to also for related to Mari's questions. I didn't talk about like selection of notes or anything, but something that I found effective, actually, especially with young students, is to have them just play on the black keys first. You know, for young students, because you can't go wrong. It's a pentatonic scale that, as you mentioned, Nick, and it's it's very, how to say, it cuts you don't have to make decision, right? Basically, because that's
It
hard.
gives them the first choice.
Yeah,
It's the
hard
limitations
to
that make it truly creative.
exactly. So you don't have to ask yourself like, oh my God, which notes do I have to start with? Okay,
Right.
it's all going to be, you know, black notes. And Nick, I love how you said, okay, you need to set parameters. That's a great idea, because it's like you need to have some set of rules, right? And you can't just like improvising is not just like playing out of the blue. And yeah, you need to set up some parameters, but yes, it's about decision making in the end. So you want to make it as easy as possible, as simple as possible.
Yeah, that idea actually came from a couple different places. It came from my freshman composition seminar, as a matter of fact. One day the professor came in and said, okay, we were all boys. Okay, boys, we're going to invent a game, right? What do you need to make up a game? And we answered, a ball, a court, a net, an in zone, an out zone, right? So before we even came up with rules, we were setting up the boundaries of our universe that we were going to play in, right? And so I take that to approach any, you know, musical endeavor, not just creating something, but well, spontaneously creating something, improvising something, or composing something outright. And also, one of my first ideas when I started teaching was to make like the Legati Musica Recacata and make a piece of music using only one note. So when I started them on the Orff instruments, I took away all the keys except A. And I said, okay, guys, we've got A. It's one note, but how many sounds can we make? We got a wooden A, we got a metal A, we got a high A, we got a low A, we got an A. I have a Tai gong that plays an A. You know, so they did. I have them hanging up right now to this day. The scores that they built, they made a whole universe, just one note. It could be, the parameters can be literally anything. They can come up with the parameters. All they have to know is what they're hearing.
Yeah, that's great. And then do you have like two students, like let two students like select like each like a different like character, or such as like octopus and then fish, and then they do their own things at the
Oh, well,
same time?
for the one note project, we decided I gave them choices for how sound changes. Slow to fast, high to low, wood, metal. So we got to explore how we can change tempo, texture, things like that. And then afterward, they told me what it made them think of. So I'm also a big fan of like Debussy putting the titles at the end of the preludes. I'm a big fan of asking for the image after the fact. What did you think of? Where did that take you? And that's how I started this activity, if you noticed.
Yeah, that's great for like let them artistically inspire, each other. And then also it's a big decision, when to end, how to end,
Well, I
course.
guess it is, but I don't know if I've ever seen it as the hardest decision. I say to them, and we say, I attend a regular event where we draw names randomly and go up and improvise. And our rule of thumb there is if you hear the ending, take it. And so, and I've told that to I haven't unleashed that on first and second graders. With my third and fourth graders, I sometimes even delve into Pauline Oliveros's sound meditations, which are text-based scores. And they deal a lot with memory of sound and trying to feel the entire life cycle of a sound. And so for that situation, I've definitely told third graders and higher, if you hear an ending, take it, and they get it.
That promotes like a really careful, deep listening skills.
That's the phrase exactly is deep listening, what Pauline Oliveros does. It's capital D, capital L. It's a whole thing, like Dalcroze is a whole thing.
Amazing. It's so neat to hear everybody's different processes and how they come into this world of creating sounds in their rooms that can engage all of their kids and or adults, as it were. I'm kind of curious out there if people have experiences with working, with older people with this, with younger people, where you kind of bridge. I've done a lot of work with trying to take my Dalcroze techniques and get flutists to embody, move, and then make sounds and give them clear parameters that they're going to feel safe to explore in. Because I think that it is very true that sometimes, especially for adults, the vastness can be a little bit like the ocean. There's too many possibilities. And so when it's just starting with the A, how many different A's can you have? And how many different, adding kind of one thing at a time into the soup can be a really lovely tool. So I'm just curious out there what other successes people have had with creating really inviting and like magical places. Because I've also seen that sometimes if I'm too restrictive, like you have to somehow invite what the unexpected things into the room as well and make it okay that they break the simple rules that you've given to create a safety, that when other things come in because they're your say so, that it's really celebrated. Anyways. Go ahead, Catherine.
I just liked your soup analogy. I use food analogies with my students quite a lot, and that you're creating a dish and it's nice to add a spice or a bit of something, and you can always add another one, but if you add in like everything you've got in the kitchen, it might not be very nice. So that idea of breaking the rules, adding something different, but also choosing what spice you add and how much of that thing you add. And is it only one thing you want to add, or two or three? But don't shove the whole kitchen cupboard in. I love food analogies, basically, with my comment.
I can add too to something about older students if you.
Yeah.
I'm trying to find it on my computer here, but with teenage students, at least, I don't have any adult students or anything like that. But with the teenage students, I have introduced some elements of indeterminacy in certain situations where there is perhaps a lacking of confidence. So I'm gonna find an example real quick if you would like to see it. I wrote a series of piano miniatures between January and June of this year, and some of them are student friendly, and some of them aren't. But one thing I wound up doing with students is something in the style of a composer called Morton Feldman. He did something called the projections, which look a little bit like this. And I'm going to share my screen if I'm allowed to. And so it's a box, and inside the box is numbers of notes. And I added certain parameters on top of that. So Morton Feldman did not specify spacing for a group of notes, but I did here. He didn't specify rhythms within those boxes, but I did that a few times. This was not one written for a student. I have subsequently written collaboratively with students pieces using this graphical format. But I'll tell you why I did this was because I had a student who just really was getting himself in a rut, because he just was not sure of himself no matter what repertoire I gave him, no matter what he did. He was very unsure of himself in a notated situation. And now, not to say that he was an amazing improviser either, but he's just totally freezing up and not opening up to anything going on here, just wanting to close himself off in the experience, right? And so I gave him that as a way to say, well, what are you gonna do now, dude? Now you have to make the choices. Now I have no idea what notes you play. I don't know if you're going to make a mistake or not. And that was his main thing, was he was so afraid to make a mistake, and every wrong note he played, he audibly and painfully was sorry, and so, what does that do to that feeling when you get a piece of music where now you have no idea what note you're going to play, and it literally doesn't matter what note you play.
So interesting. Yeah, Megan, please.
I can just share what I do in regards to improv, sometimes with imagery, but so I teach violin to littles up through teenagers, sometimes adults. And for about 3 or 4 years now, almost all of my students, we spend the first few minutes making up a motif. So I can tell them it can be 3 notes, something very, very short, no more than 2 measures. They make up something and then I play it back to them, and then I make something up and they play it back to me. We limit it to 2 motifs each. Sometimes related, sometimes not. Often I'll just look out the window and I'll be like, yeah, I was trying to play it like that bird up on the branch. Do you see the bird? Can you try it again and make it sound like what the bird looks like to you? So I have a great window in my studio, so I use nature and things out my window quite a bit when I make up mine. And the other thing I do for beginners, although I haven't done it as much for advanced students, but students that are just learning to play open strings, like twinkle rhythms and things like that, I will just have them improvise something like a simple quarter note or something, and then I'll move to it. And I'll try to move exactly how it inspires me to move. And then I'll do the reverse. So they can really see is, if they're practicing Mississippi Stop, Stop, is that stop, stop really inspiring a march, or is it kind of a little bit lazy? Does it make me want to walk? So I'll be very direct in how I translate what they play on open A to how I move. And then I ask them to do the reverse, and I vary things up and see if they can reflect what they hear in my movement. So.
I love that mirroring back. Yes, Dorita.
One of the interesting types of improvisations that I've done with all ages is vocal. And I have the students improvise song, vocal sounds with all kinds of nonsense words like boo, yak, do, fa, 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 lee, and move to it as well. And pretty soon they begin to hear sounds in their minds, which is amazing in the improvisatory, because with movement and voice, it's an incredible emotional experience for the person. So I thought I would. We don't use voice enough. We rely too much on the Orff instrument. So I'm making a pitch to use voice.
Yes, please, Christine.
Yeah,
Just
I
jump-
was going to say that I agree, and it's there's a real connection. Of course, I'm a singer, so I'm prejudiced, of course, but there's really a connection between your body and your voice. You know, it really they work. For example, I can't sing unless I move, and vice versa. When you move, well, that's not always with me, but that's what I'd like to encourage is when you move, it makes you want to sing. I think it's maybe that's a little bit less, natural. When you move, it makes you want to sing. It's more that when you sing, it makes you want to move, but then to show them that to experience that it can work both ways that way. But that's wonderful to start with nonsense syllables like that or any words. I hadn't thought of that. I usually just do it with just sounds, random kind of sounds, which that can also be inspired by images and things like that. And then also to help with the voice too, I find that moving, it makes you sing better too. There's always this about, the breath and the diaphragm, and all this stuff. And it makes people just kind of stand like that. But if you move while you sing, it just liberates the voice, and it completely changes things. It completely changes. I'm a brain gym teacher too, so I'm trying to work ways to do brain gym with music. And so I did a little seminar with I taught the first time I ever taught adults was a class of Orff teachers, and I wanted to introduce them to some more movement that we do in Dalcroze, and with vocal improvisation, which they should know, but apparently this group of teachers has never done it before. And so I just had them do some of just the cross crawl movements that we use, and then and free movements too, but to move around while they were, and just improvising with, the pentatonic scale, which, for us probably seems really easy, but if you've never done it, they didn't realize. And it made such a difference. When first they were standing still and did it, they were all very, and then they started moving, and it just was, it became, it was fantastic, and with children, I haven't done yet that with improvising with melodies, just more with sounds, like you say, but yeah, it's true. It's a real great connection. Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you, Christine. Well, we still have a couple minutes left. Does anyone else want to share something before we have to bid each other adieu for the evening, or day, as it were, for some of us? Yes, Carolyn.
Yes, nothing related to today's topic, but Nick, you mentioned Kurtag Jazzitok, right? So I just would like to hear more about it, because I've heard it at several occasions, and I don't really know what it is, but I'd like to hear
let me
more.
pull up some pages for you then. It's a so the Kurtag's idea behind the Jazzitok is when young children, like very young children, first see the piano, their instinct is not quite to go up and play a beautiful little scale or a melody. They want to just take their palm or their whole arm and just boom and smack it down on the keyboard. And so Kurtag said, why not? Let's write music that taps into this kinetic instinct in children. And so I don't use every single piece, first of all, because there are notational things that you have to orient to slightly, but I still think on the whole it's a little easier to start doing than more traditional notation. I'll tell you a few situations where I use this, and I did say to Stephen, this is going to have to be another presentation, but it has, you see, very
I would be
large,
interested in that.
yeah, it has very large circles for palms and large vertical bars for the elbows, right? And let me see if I can find a piece that I use very frequently. One example, I use that one quite a bit. I use the rotating palm. So he comes up with these half moon shapes for literally placing your palm down, you know, thumb side or pinky side and rolling it on white keys or black keys. And so you can see it still teaches you range of the piano, and he adds extreme high and extreme low with the 3 bars on top, 2 bars on the bottom. He does have this unique durational system that he uses, not just in the Jet de Coq, but in his other works too, where he uses these fermata-like gestures. And the way I think of those is a rest, but not a beat of rest in the metrical sense, but just a beat of rest in the psychological sense of time. I also use this one hang on, I'm on a 2-page view. I use this one very frequently, the Prelude and Waltz in C, and sorry. And so anybody who's going to come across this one, the Prelude and Waltz in C, you can see that there's a kind of crisscross thing that's happening. And so one of the notational principles I love to start with is that when notes change octave, they change whether they're line notes or space notes. And so if there's ever children who having general difficulties with notation, I'll pull this out and say, hey, look, this is all C. Every note that you're looking at is C. You just have to know which one's the highest one, which one's the lowest one, which one's the one in the middle. And they love it once they get the motion of it. And I'll show you playing that one involves, you know, 2 pointer fingers, and they got to bump, 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 bump. And so they got to move their whole body, you know, all the way side to side. You know, these little kids have to reach all the way to the top, all the way to the bottom. Sometimes if they're small enough, they play them standing up. You know,
I love it. This is like really, you know, a great tool for improvisation at the piano.
Oh yeah, and the dude's been writing them for like 40 or 50 years now. He's on something like volume 11 or 12. And that's just volume 1.
Yeah. No, and as a person interested in visual arts as well, I just find these scores, like visual scores, like very amazing also.
Yeah, with regards to the piano miniatures I wrote this year, I decided that every 4th miniature would be sort of in Kurtág style, and the more I wrote the miniatures, the more comfortable with those things I started to get, and I figured out how to engrave his little fermata like shapes, and yeah, it's amazing. Kurtág changed everything for me.
Oh my goodness. I don't want to stop us, but we
No,
do.
yeah, I already said this has got to be another
So,
presentation.
spoiler alert, we're going to have Nick back to talk a little bit about Kurtág for sure. And the next meetup is on the 30th of September. So mark your calendars, because maybe that will be our next topic. I have to check in with my colleagues. I am so grateful that you all came here for meetup number 75. We can't wait to welcome you. Please come and check out Joan's masterclass this Friday. You don't want to miss it. I have a short course coming up. We've got great masterclasses coming your way. If there's anyone out there who you know of who is brand new to our circles or needs assistance to be able to come, we have some wonderful scholarship opportunities, and we want to keep this door open for anyone who is adjacent, interested, curious. They're welcome here. And as you can tell, what an amazing conversation and rich exchange we can have. Thank you guys for making my Monday and helping me feel inspired. I have like sticky notes all over my desk. And so tomorrow I get to spend some time thinking about all these great things I learned. So thank you all very much, and I'm wishing you all a great night. I'm going to stop our recording and have a wonderful week.
All right.
Thank you, Emma.